Yeah, that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually in there. Kennedy assassination, Love Field, the Carousel Club, the Baker Hotel, all those places are
Yeah.
all tied together.
Well, tell them about the premise of your book, and you were writing this. What I think.
No, I'm not giving anyone my book away. I might put it on a.
I find it interesting that you were writing about this subject matter in what was it, 2010, something like that. Well, okay. If you don't want to give it
done, I may just read it aloud and
okay.
Well, it'd be like a cassettes. You know, we'll put it on a.
Well, just a short synopsis of what the.
It's the way the connections between it connects the assassination of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and well, it's pretty much the premise is it's like my life, but I'm a little bit smarter. I'm not smarter, but it's really my life, the real things that happened to me in my life. Also, along with some New Age kind of conspiracy things that have stayed around for quite a while, and some things that at the time, it's not a coincidence that a lot of the people who said they saw things and they heard shots, that it's not a coincidence that they all died really quick, and like they died of heart attacks and slipped in their tub or drowned in their basement or something. You know, these people that said, "No, I saw somebody behind that wall in the grassy knoll." Well, they just happened to die at age 27 of natural causes. You know, they had a heart attack or something when they had no heart condition at all. All the people, and to this day, I was talking to a guy just the other day from Cleveland who had been down here, been to the Kennedy Memorial, which I never had gone down there to see it. But he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, he said, "Do you think there was more than 3 shots fired?" I said, "Yes." And I said, "Yes," and I'll tell you why. Because there was 4 people in that car. Jackie never talked about it, but Governor Connolly and his wife, to their dying day, and they weren't just yahoos, somebody that had an agenda or anything. They were politicians. They had something to lose. They were people who didn't just go blabbing off their mouth, just shooting off their mouth. They weren't somebody like Rush Limbaugh or somebody who just could say insulting things. Or they were people who knew politics. They grew up around politics. To their dying day, they said there was more than 3 shots fired, and they were in the car. They got hit. They were in the car, and no matter what kind of pressure people put on them, if they were asked, they would tell you that there were more than 3 shots fired. Both of them. So that's half of the people that were in the car. Jackie never said a word about it, and Jack Kennedy was dead.
So you're not going to tell them about the actual plot, though?
No, I'd have to just. It concerns kind of a new age. It's got a new age. It's the travels of. It's my actual travels and things that I've seen, along with places I've been, things I've seen, things I've done that have never been disclosed. I'm not sure they should be disclosed, but I was close to history, and it was a good thing that I went any closer, because I probably wouldn't have lived to be the ripe old age of 60-something, because I was so close I could feel the heat. Let me put it that way. And that's the way the thing really starts out. You see, my book starts out at Love Field. We were so crazy back then. We snuck onto the tarmac and at Love Field. It was late at night, and we laid down on the runway, right between the landing lights. In other words, these huge lights that help the planes land, we laid down right between those lights. And you want to talk about heat?
You're not going to include any substances in that.
The heat coming off those lights, and then way off in the distance, probably 10 miles off in the distance, you could see a plane approaching. And then as the planes approached, this is back in, all of a sudden, the planes would put on more lights. And then on the landing field, more lights came on. So this is when the lights didn't stay on all the time. There were some lights that stayed on, but they did turn on the landing lights, and the lights were coming on in the plane. So we're laying there watching this plane come in. It's it seems like it's slow, but it's actually going, what 300, 400 miles an hour when it's approaching. It slows down to 200 probably for landing. But it's getting closer and closer and closer, and the more lights are coming on in the plane, and then it's getting really, really close. And a good friend, there was like 6 of us, maybe 6 of us out there, and one guy, when the plane started getting, one guy broke and ran. He couldn't take it. He couldn't take this giant. If the plane would have hit us, it would have had to crash. We weren't going to get hit, but when it just got closer and closer, and then it was just the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life, and the plane's coming down, right at you, and then all of a sudden the plane just is huge, and it's just screaming, and all of a sudden the landing gear's coming down, and all of a sudden these huge tires just go shooting over your head, and as it got right after the thing, these huge tires just, you could, if you stood up, they were probably like 5-10 feet over where you could reach. Huge tires, and the plane, the bottom of the plane just shoots over your head, and as soon as it gets over your head, they reverse the engines, and that means that the thrust comes back, pushes it back. They reverse the engines, so there's this huge burst of air that comes flying back as soon as the jet goes over your head. And you talk about heat and noise. It was like something you'd never see. It was terrifying. And of course we were inebriated, and so that even intensified it. We were not in our right minds. Let me put it that way. We had been altered, and it was intense. And we got up and we just staggered away. Because we thought at the time we had to get out of there because the guys that were landing in the plane might have been able to see us. If they were looking, we were right there amongst the lights. And so we jumped up and ran for it. And that is the night, that same night, that is the night that I recognized a car that, I was a car guy. And that is the night that I recognized the car that was central to the whole assassination. I recognized the car parked at Love Field in the little park that was at the end of the runway. That was, I was a car kid, and I recognized the car. And that vehicle belonged to one of the people that were in the plot. That's a fact. That car, that's a fact. The car was part of the plot. It belonged to a friend of Jack Ruby, and that's where the whole story begins.
Yeah, Love Field, that was just a really high-tech place at the time. It was fascinating. It was great.
It had a monorail.
I never did anything like that, but my girlfriend and I would call a cab at about 2 a.m. in the morning and sneak out of the house and go to Love Field and walk around in there, and it was just fabulously modern.
Yep.
And that was so much fun, and we would make up a different story. We would make up a different story for every cab ride of some wild reason we were going to Love Field at 2 a.m. in the morning.
We would go down there just to ride the monorail. Just went from the parking lot to the terminal. It wasn't very long, but it was like the Jetsons or something. It was totally modern.
For that time. And they had that little area where you could sit, and there were the little TV screens. I think it was coin operated. Do you remember that?
Yeah, they had TVs where you could watch TV.
Uh-huh.
And you had to pay.
Yeah.
You had to pay like a dime or something, and you could watch like an hour for 50 cents or something.
They had a lot of pinball machines in one area, which weren't really all that prevalent at that time.
No, that was like gambling.
Yeah.
To the Republicans, pinball machines were like gambling. Another thing that was unique about, I don't know about Love Field if it was unique or not, but you could they had phones everywhere.
Right.
They had phones everywhere. And so you could page someone. You picked up a phone, and it didn't have the regular dial on it. It had like 3 different dials, and you pushed in, and you could say, "Would you page Bill Smith to come to gate 7?" So we would call up and say, "Would you page Abby Normal to come, or Connie Lingus to come to gate 7?" And they would do it. They would do it. The person that was there was like, "Will Connie Lingus please come to gate 7? We actually did that. That's the truth. And they would do it because they thought, well, or would say somebody like, "Dick Hardalot, please call would you page Dick Hardalot?" And they would do it. They did it. It wasn't like they would censor it. Later on, they got hip to it, and they would say, "Are you sure?" But at the very beginning, there was a person there that was doing it. They'd say anything as long as it sounded kind of like a name. They would repeat it all over the whole airport. It was pretty funny. We would die laughing. But that was the age of innocence. That was our age of innocence.
Yes, and no one was monitoring what we were doing then.
Yeah.
It was a great feeling. There's a hair on this part.